When people visit the city of Santa Cruz, the first thing that comes to mind is mountainous areas covered in redwood trees, beautiful coastal areas, and surfing. The thought of Santa Cruz having a rich Chinese history doesn't immediately come to mind for most. The goal of this video is to analyze the Chinese Pioneer Memorial at Evergreen Cemetery, and if it plays a role in shedding light on Santa Cruz's Chinese history. In analyzing the Chinese Pioneer Memorial, I will address its history, location, and its effects on the city today. The Chinese Pioneer Memorial was created in 2014 in efforts to recognize and honor the Chinese pioneers that immigrated here in the late 1800s. Most of the Chinese population immigrated down to Santa Cruz after being forced out of San Francisco during the gold rush. Many of the pioneers were buried here at Evergreen Cemetery, which is why the city felt that this was the best location for the memorial. Evergreen Cemetery is located on the outskirts of Santa Cruz, right near the 17 highway. Within the cemetery, a large flight of stairs leads you to the back left corner, which is where the memorial is located. A large archway hangs over 5 headstones with Chinese lettering inscribed. One of the headstones, however, is left blank. This is to signify the many pioneers who were buried here, but their headstones and names were lost in the many floods that passed through. The physical burial area for the Chinese pioneers is to the left of the memorial. As you can see, they were buried on a very steep hill, which is susceptible to landslides. There are no remaining grave sites on this hill anymore. Next to the archway is a placard explaining the memorial itself and the history of the Chinese pioneers and their impact on the city. Many of these pioneers worked as launderers, craftsmen, or cooks. There were actually 4 Chinatowns in Santa Cruz, but none exist today. After seeing where the memorial is located, you can imagine how many people venture through the cemetery to see the memorial. Not only is it on the outskirts of Santa Cruz, but it is placed in the back corner of a cemetery. Should the city have put the memorial somewhere more central and accessible? How many citizens of Santa Cruz truly know of its Chinese history? The question we also must address is, who is the memorial for? In the Emerson, Fretz, and Shaw book, Writing Ethnographic Field Notes, they explain that it is important to write down what physical properties a memorial has, but also balance that out with a personal reflection. Being that the memorial is on a physical burial ground of the Chinese pioneers, I see this as more of a recognition of the Chinese pioneers' efforts to improve the city. In addition, I do think the city installed this memorial to help educate the Santa Cruz community of their Chinese history. In Chinese tradition, it is important for the living to honor and care for the deceased graves, and the placard reads, "Here it is our role as Santa Cruz descendants to pay our respects." Is this memorial successful in honoring the deceased Chinese pioneers? In some ways, yes, and in others, no. In comparing this memorial to one like the Murdered Jews Memorial in Berlin, we can see some distinct differences between the two. The Murdered Jews Memorial is a sea of stone blocks scaled to different heights to represent the mounds of dead Jewish bodies during the Holocaust. As much as it is a very solemn memorial, it seems to be used more as a social area for picnics and lounging. People pass through the stone blocks and have little idea that it is a Holocaust memorial. This is due to the fact that the information center is not easily accessible and there are no clear markers of it being a Holocaust memorial. Although people use the memorial as a social area, it doesn't entirely mean that the memorial isn't successful. Is the memorial's goal to have people come to only observe the Holocaust history, or to be used and have potential for people questioning its existence? As for the Chinese Pioneer Memorial, not many people go through the cemetery to have conversations, let alone lounge. But the memorial is clearly marked and has a very descriptive placard indicating why the memorial was built. In my eyes, the memorial in Berlin is more successful due to the fact that it attracts residents and tourists to occupy the space and at least create a possibility for education. The Chinese memorial lacks an incentive for people to occupy the area. Very few people stroll through the cemetery for personal interest. On the other hand, the way people occupy the Berlin Memorial isn't exactly respectful of the people who passed during the Holocaust. The Chinese memorial imposes respect due to the fact that it is in a cemetery. When people visit this memorial, they understand what should and should not be done, and I think that's what separates the Chinese memorial from the Murdered Jews Memorial. In conclusion, I do believe that the Chinese Pioneer Memorial serves a sole purpose in shedding light on Santa Cruz's Chinese history. Although it isn't very successful or used, it's a space that academics and schools can use to educate the younger generations, to help integrate that piece of history into the present. There is more the city of Santa Cruz could do to help recognize and celebrate its Chinese history, such as Chinese festivals and anniversaries at the memorial, but I do see the building of this memorial as a great start. Of course, if I had more time to investigate the memorial's history and speak with city officials, we could gain a better understanding of what the city's future efforts are. I think that if anyone is interested in understanding Santa Cruz's history, they can gain a lot by visiting the Chinese Pioneer Memorial. I hope this video has given you a new perspective and outlook on the city of Santa Cruz, and hopefully promotes you to visit the memorial yourself.